All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone so much for joining our webinar today on how to become a great mentor. I'm really excited to have Dr. Jen Heemstra here today, and she will share her insights and her experiences on, what really makes a good mentor. Before I pass it off to her, I just want to share a few company slides to introduce Proteintech. So Proteintech is a leading manufacturer of antibodies and immunoassays. We have a really expansive portfolio of antibodies that encompass over 13,000 targets. We also offer ELISA kits, IHC kits, antibody labeling kits, and magnetic cell separation kits. Within our Proteintech brand, we also have our humankind cytokines and growth factors, and all our proteins are expressed in human HEC293 cells, which means that they have native folding, post-translational modifications, and glycosylation. And then lastly, we also have our Chromatech nanobody-based reagents. And nanobodies are essentially tiny antibodies, and because they're so tiny, they're really great for clean immunoprecipitations, super resolution microscopy, and protein purification. So as a company, we measure our success by our customers' scientific success, specifically by helping them publish impactful research faster. So this graph here on the left shows that over time, our company has been featured in more and more publications each year. And as of now, we have over 200,000 publication citations. We are one of the top 10 cited antibody companies and also the fastest growing company in product citations. We also value that we are a company for scientists by scientists. So our award-winning products are self-manufactured, and we offer the largest in-house portfolio of antibodies for the human proteome. We also know the importance of product validation, and we use knockout, knockdown models for validation whenever possible. And as antibody experts, we have in-depth knowledge of immunoassay applications and can offer outstanding technical support. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Jen Heemstra. So Jen is currently the Charles Allen Thomas Professor and Chair in the Department of Chemistry at Washington University in St. Louis. Her research focuses on harnessing the molecular recognition and self-assembly properties of nucleic acids and proteins for applications in biosensing and bioimaging. In addition to her research, Jen is also actively engaged in science communication, outreach, and advocacy via her social media presence and professional development seminars and workshops. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Jen. Thank you so much for being here today and for, providing us with all your insights.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to be joining you. And thanks to everyone who took the hour to join us. Hopefully there will be something useful for you here, no matter where you are in your career stage. And we're going to have a little bit of participation. So I figured I would start by just letting everyone find the chat and make sure it's set to chat to everyone so that everyone who's here can see your answer as well as me getting to see it. And we will start out by just drop in the chat in like 1 or 2 words, kind of in what capacity you mentor. Like, are you a faculty member? Are you an industry group leader? Are you a graduate student or a postdoc? Where are you working and what does mentoring look like for you? Awesome. Lots of postdocs, some faculty, some senior scientists. It's fun to see a few names I know in there as well. PhD students. Awesome. I'll give that a few more seconds to catch up. Cool. I will say a lot of what I'll share today will be examples of mentoring structures that have come from my own group. And so while some of it will be a little bit specific to being a faculty member, the goal isn't for you to do exactly what I'm doing or recommending, but rather just to show how you can think through mentoring practices in whatever context you're in. And so no matter where you are in your career, you'll be able to apply this to your mentoring relationships. All right, so with that, we're gonna have one more participation. Before I dive into talking about mentoring, I want you to tell me what you think of when you think about mentoring. So in the chat, again, to everyone, put one word that comes to mind when you think about mentoring. Oh, awesome. Yeah. Listening, supporting, guiding, trusting, empathy. Oh, that's such kindness. I love this. This is so good. You all are already experts at this. Active listener, empowering. Oh, that is a really good one as well. It's not about doing, it's about empowering, paying it forward. Absolutely. I saw coaching and being supportive. Guidance. Awesome. So you all have a lot of this already figured out, right? Mentoring is really complicated. And if you talk to 10 people, you would probably get 10 different definitions of mentoring. And that's because mentoring is not only a skill that is, takes a whole lifetime to master, as I mentioned in the abstract, because these are really, really difficult skills. They're skills of interacting with other people. But mentoring is also a multifaceted process, right? It can involve providing advice to someone. It can involve asking questions and listening and being a listening ear. It can involve connecting people and helping them network. It can involve being there for someone on the good days and the bad days and empowering someone and helping them to believe in what they're capable of, right? So it's pretty clear that mentoring is absolutely essential to all of our careers. I imagine there's no one here who would say, oh, I haven't had help from any mentor ever in my career, right? All of us have benefited from mentors who have helped us to be where we are and who still help us to progress in our careers. But one of the things that's really challenging, whether you're in academia or also in industry, I think this is a challenge, is that we aren't really trained in how to be mentors, right? We're trained to be scientists, and then we're thrown into these mentoring situations, whether you're a graduate student mentoring an undergrad in the lab, whether you're a group leader in industry who's mentoring your team members or other scientists, whether you're a staff scientist or a faculty member in academia, and you might be mentoring an entire group or subgroup of individuals, we weren't really trained how to do this. And, just taking my own context of being a tenure track faculty member, this also applies if you're like a graduate student as well. But we, take someone like me who is not really trained in mentoring or leadership, right? I was trained in how to do chemistry research and chemical biology research. But then when I became an assistant professor, I got put in charge of multiple people as mentees, and most of them had relatively little research experience. They're all early career researchers, most of them new grad students or undergraduates, some of them, early career postdocs. And then we operate in this system where there's minimal oversight for your mentoring. And then whether, again, you're a faculty member or a PhD student, you've kind of got 5 years to make or break your career. So now you start to look at this of poor training, you're working with people who are relatively inexperienced, there's no oversight, and there's a lot of pressure, right? What could possibly go wrong, right? This is really, at least in academia, just a terrible situation that we create for mentoring, and is really something that we need to do better. In fact, it's kind of amazing we ever get it right, as PhD comics would point out to us. I don't know about you, but PhD comics got me through a lot of my PhD, and they're always a little bit tough to see, but only because there's a lot of truth to them as well. But really, at the end of the day, we're not where we want to be with regard to mentoring, I think in academia, definitely, but also probably in industry. But we can do better, and we have to do better. And so what I think everyone here, you're here because you already know this and you're already convinced of this. And what I want to use this time to work on together is this idea that we don't have to choose between great science and great mentoring. And in fact, when we choose great mentoring, when we create environments of kindness and support, we actually will produce the best science as well. These things can go hand in hand, and we can make this happen, but it doesn't happen automatically, right? Achieving great mentoring that feeds into kindness and uplifting the people in a situation, and also then leading to great science, takes a lot of things. It takes some intentionality, it takes gaining knowledge and skills, planning, listening, and it also takes making mistakes and being willing to get feedback and to grow and improve. And so I want to take a little bit of time just to give you 3 quick examples of areas, just ideas of how you can adopt mentoring practices based on the resources that are out there. And again, these are just 3 examples from my lab. The goal is not for you to go and replicate these, but rather be thinking about what from your context can you leverage in order to think about new or improved mentoring practices that you can use in your environment. And then we'll give you a few minutes to think through an action item for yourself, and then I'll wrap up and we'll leave lots of time for the Q&A at the end. All right, so how do I learn mentoring practices, right? Occasionally you get to take a class on mentoring, or get to go to webinars or things like that. But we never really get the same amount of training in mentoring as we get in other areas that are essential to our professional success, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't learn and grow and develop these skills. And so 3 places that I think you can look to in order to learn new mentoring practices, right? This isn't rocket science, right? You can kind of leverage similarity to things you already know how to do. You can go out and learn from the experts and from the resources that are out there. And then you can ask those around you. And no matter what sort of mentoring situation you're in, you can always do any of these 3 things. And so just to give you an example of this first one thing I realized as I became a faculty member is that, I had to also learn how to teach. For the record, I also wasn't prepared or trained how to teach in the classroom, but as it was, I taught in the first semester as a faculty member. And so on, almost my first day on the job, I found myself in front of a classroom. And that was before I even had a research group. So I had to learn to teach before I had to learn to be a mentor. And as I learned how to teach, one of the things I realized, or that my colleagues told me, was that if you're going to be equitable and effective as a teacher, you need to, show up to your classroom. You need to tell people what they're expected to do to be successful, what they're expected to learn, how they're going to demonstrate that learning. You provide the resources and environment they need to do this. You show up, you lecture on the things that they need to learn. You assess them in the ways you said you would. And then if they perform at a level that meets expectations, you evaluate them positively, right? If they show competency on an exam, then they pass the class, right? And so the same principles, I realized, apply to mentoring researchers or leading a group, right? And so I started to think about, well, how do we communicate this in the classroom, right? If you've ever taken a class, you have seen one of these. It's a syllabus. It's just a document that lays out all of the expectations for what you're expected to learn and how you're going to demonstrate that learning, right? And so you can think about then, by analogy, how can we apply this to our mentoring? And in this case, that would look like a lab policy document, right? Having a lab policy document is just essentially a syllabus for your research group or for the individuals that you are mentoring. And so there's really no right or wrong of how to do this. The important thing is that it needs to be yours. In all honesty, our lab actually did not have a lab policy document for our first 7 or so years, because I thought, I just talk to people all of the time and it's fine. And over the years, some of that knowledge started getting lost and wasn't communicated as effectively as it could be. And I still put off drafting a policy. And then finally we had a moment to do this. I said, let's just sit down and draft a policy manual. And I realized that part of my hesitancy to do this is that, right, we all get policy manuals of various times, of various types over time. And our natural habit is you get it, right? And if it's a paper copy, like open a drawer and you shove it in the drawer and then you forget about it until you have to clean out that drawer. Or now it, just languishes in some file in, a box folder or whatever. And so one of my hesitations was, I don't want to do this in a way that everyone just like shoves it in a drawer and forgets about it. So the most important thing is, no matter what you do, whatever document you develop, it should be yours. And I mean yours in the collective sense of you and the people who you mentor. And so really the best way to do this is develop it together so everyone actually knows what's in it, agrees to that, and buys into it. And so things you can consider putting in there, much like a syllabus, what are your expectations? And this goes both ways. What should your mentees, what do you expect of your mentees? And also, what should they expect of you? How can they access you? How long, should they expect it to be if they ask for a meeting before you're able to meet with them? What sorts of supports can you provide to them? You can also have protocols, especially if you're a group leader. How do you do business? This is all like the really boring stuff, but it's still really important for people to know. And then finally, lab culture. This is something we didn't think about for a while, but really articulating, what do we value? What are we all about? How do we expect people to interact with each other? And just as with a syllabus or any other document you make, you don't have to go it alone. When I started teaching, I went and got syllabi from 3 or 4 other faculty, so that I would have a good starting point. And similarly, you can ask for sample policy documents or mentoring agreements and work from there. All right. So second, we can learn from the experts and utilize resources that are out there, right? There's a lot of people who put a lot of thought into mentoring practices and who even study what makes for effective mentoring practices. And there's lots of great resources. So we can take advantage of those. And so one story that I have from that is that we started about 5 years ago thinking about individualized development plans, right? Because every single person that you mentor is different, and none of them are you. And so none of them are going to have your exact career goals. None of them are going to walk the exact career path you have, but rather they are all going to have different goals. And so your goal is not to help them replicate everything you've done, but rather help them to identify where they want to go and to help them get there. And so there are these things called IDPs, individualized development plans, that are just a great template for these discussions. So these, I've put 2 here, one from the American Chemical Society and one from Science Careers. And these have different formats. And so you can play around with whether you like one of these or if you want to change it, or if you don't like either, there's a whole bunch of other versions out there. But no matter what, find something that you can use along with those you mentor that can just help them organize their thoughts about what are their goals and how are they going to get there. And so in our lab, we actually adapted this in a way in that we about 5 years ago, started having individual one-on-one meetings once a month. So I meet for 30 minutes once a month with every member of my lab. We actually meet a lot more often than that, but this is one meeting that is always put on the calendar and carved out. And the goal is really, really specific. It's like, we are not going to talk nitty-gritty of research. That's the one thing we will not talk about. We will not look at a gel. We will not be looking at NMR. We won't be talking about a PCR or any of that stuff. But rather, the constant pull is to only talk about what's urgent in front of you, which is always just the troubleshooting research. But rather, these meetings are 30 minutes when we're going to talk about everything else, all of the big picture stuff. Where do you want to go in your career? What are your goals? How are you doing towards those goals? How are you managing collaborations? How can I help you with that? How are you spending your time? What would be most helpful as you think through, the next year or the next month? And so out of that, we ended up putting together our own report structure that's essentially a merger of a project management plan and then also that individualized development plan. But the really cool thing, and this is kind of the outline of the report, and people just go in and update it every month. But the thing that we really loved having in here was everyone's agenda, that everyone gets to set their own agenda for the meeting. They tell me how they want to spend the 30 minutes in discussion. And then we actually have people upload it the day before, because I realized if I can look at these agendas the morning of the meetings and get to think through them as I'm out for my morning walk or run, then it helps me show up better to the meeting. And one of my favorite stories from this is that one of the grad students in our lab just asks the most phenomenal questions on these documents. And I'll never forget, one morning I was reading through her report because we were going to meet later in the day. And on her agenda, the first question was, how do I know if I'm succeeding in graduate school? And I'll never forget that. Yeah, I'll never forget that, because I was sipping my coffee and I literally had my coffee an inch from my mouth and I just froze. And I was like, wow. And I think I set my coffee back down and I opened a comment. I said, you have just identified the existential question in graduate school. I can't wait for our meeting and we're going to talk about it. And I thought, I've got like 3.5 hours to figure out how I would define whether or not you're succeeding in grad school, but it just has provided such a rich opportunity for these discussions that wouldn't happen otherwise. All right, and then the third way that we can learn new mentoring practices is just to ask those around us for help and feedback. So no matter what type of context you are a mentor in, whether you're a grad student or a postdoc or a group leader or a staff scientist or faculty member, you can always ask not only those who you mentor for feedback, but you can also ask your peers, or if you have someone who's watching you mentor, who's maybe your mentor, you can always ask them for feedback. And so why is this important, right? We all need coaching and feedback to do better. I often tell my group, as a group leader, right, I'm going as fast as I can. I still, even at this point in my career, I've done a lot of leadership training, but I still have relatively little leadership training compared to my chemistry training. And in my case, I don't have a boss or who gives me feedback on my leadership, right? In industry, you might have this. You probably have your manager who's watching how you manage your direct reports, how you mentor others. But in academia, there's no one who's going to come along and say, oh, I noticed that you're not using IDPs or whatever. Or I noticed that you missed that one-on-one meeting last month and that's not great. And so we all need feedback. And at the same time, for the people in my lab, or if you're a student postdoc, they're working really hard. They're doing a lot of things that are new to them. And something we realized is our lab previously had really no formal feedback mechanism in place. Again, if you're in industry, you probably have some sort of an annual or semi-annual or quarterly performance evaluation where your mentor or boss, and those can be separate things, where your boss at least gives you feedback on what you're doing well and what you could do better. But in our lab, we realized, there were occasional conversations, but we didn't have any sort of really formalized way where I could communicate to people, here's where I see you doing really well. Here are some areas where you might be able to grow. And so we said, okay, we need feedback, but we can create systems for that. And so the thing that we did is, and this was all driven by the lab, actually, the lab, the members of my group were the ones who said, we really want to start doing this. And so we worked together and put together a way to do this that would be kind of safe and supportive, though it also takes a lot of trust. And so in our feedback exercise, everyone asks 3 questions. The first is they say, my goal is to blank. For me, I say, my goal is to be an effective mentor and leader in our lab. People in the lab can say, my goal is to be a great mentor to other students, or my goal is to be successful as a grad student, or my goal is to figure out where I want to go in my career. And then what am I doing well? And what could I do better? And then we get to say, based on feedback from last year, this is what I've been working on. How am I doing? Again, where have you seen improvement and where do I still need to work? So you'll notice in both of these, they're very specific in what they ask for, but they also ask for both positive and negative. Feedback, the things we need to improve, that can be important, but often it's even more helpful to know what's going well so that we can keep doing that. And then if people want to add an extra question, then they can do that. And so just a really nitty-gritty of how we do this, but again, it can look like whatever you want. We just create, everyone in our lab gives each other feedback, and we just have everyone make a form using Google Forms, or we used to use SurveyMonkey, or you can use whatever program you want. And then we just make a big spreadsheet and everyone lists the link for their form. And then everyone goes and fills out each other's surveys. And actually we started out totally anonymous. No one had to sign their feedback. And then people started asking, they were like, can I sign my feedback if I want? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I realized I need to do that because everyone knows which one is mine anyways, and I should sign my feedback. And the really cool thing is that we have basically gone almost fully non-anonymous. In fact, when we do this now, I have to warn people. I'm like, okay, it's anonymous if you want, but if everyone except one person signs their feedback, you're not going to be as anonymous as you might think. So, just take that into consideration with what you write. And this is optional to participate in, but over time, almost everyone participates. And so again, the most important aspect though, in all of this, just like your policy manual, is that everyone buys into it. If I just showed up and said, here's what we're going to do, right? Then this could be a really scary or unsafe activity or wouldn't feel very supportive. But because our group has crafted this over time and they've really been the ones to guide this, it's created an exercise that is really uplifting and really, really helpful and that people continually want to keep doing. Okay. So with that, I'm now going to give you a quick break and then I'll come back and wrap up. So I always say, the worst thing that could happen is that you go to a webinar and you walk away and you're like, oh, maybe that was fun or entertaining or whatever, but that nothing changes in anything that you do. Really, the goal is for you to take away one thing, one actionable thing that you can do in whatever mentoring context you're in, current or planning for the future, that will help you to grow as a mentor. And that really comes down to not just something like, oh, I want to be a better listener, but rather actually having a practice in place that can help you achieve that goal. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes to think about and write down and basically plan some sort of a mentoring action item for yourself that you could start implementing today. Okay, 4 minutes. So you're about halfway through the time. And I should have said this. You can write it down just for yourself, or if you want to put in the chat, you absolutely can. And I'll encourage you, whatever goal you set, whatever plan you have, make it actionable. And so, what will you actually do that you can know that you're implementing a better mentoring practice? Having a goal where you can say, oh, yes, I have achieved that. All right. And that is 4 minutes. Hopefully you got to write down some thoughts. If you didn't get to finish, you can always keep working on it while I talk, or you can take this away as homework. But again, the important thing is that you have something actionable. So if you want to grow in setting and communicating expectations, then think about how you can actually implement a system for that. Or I saw a great one about you want to grow in conflict resolution. Think about a book you can read, or a podcast you can listen to, or a course that you can sign up for that can help you do that better. Whatever your goal is, think about something actionable. And if you're really struggling to think about a way to make it actionable, then we can always talk about those in the Q&A, because maybe we can all brainstorm together here as a group. But in order to get to that Q&A, I will wrap up with just a few more slides. One thing I wanted to share is that, as we improve our mentoring, something that I think everyone here probably already is bought into is this idea that we're all in this together, right? That great mentoring is not a zero-sum game. If one person does, you do better in mentoring, and then you share those resources with me so that I can be better in mentoring, we actually all win. And most importantly, the people that we mentor win the most. And that's who we want to be able to serve through our mentoring. And so a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to talk with my good friend Neil Garg, and we were actually talking about this exact topic and really honing in on, looking at mentoring in general, but really honing in on mentoring in the context of academic research labs, because that's somewhere where I would guess anyone in academia has seen, anyone who's come through academia at any point has seen that we've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long way to go. And we thought about how could we provide a sort of call to action around this topic of mentoring, but also provide resources, have this idea of we are all in this together, right? Neil and I are both people who are still always trying to be better mentors, who weren't really formally trained for this, but who want to do a good job and be there for our lab members who we mentor, for everyone who we mentor. And so we thought, why don't we create an initiative? And we created this Mentor First initiative. And the goal here is not to make anyone feel bad about the things that they don't get right in mentoring, but rather for us to have a call for commitment, to be continually growing as mentors, and most importantly, to provide really, really practical resources to help each other keep growing in this area. And so I've put the QR code and the website here. The QR code will also be on my on my conclusion slide. And so I hope you'll go there and take a minute to go and take the pledge and look at the resources that are there. And we actually have to give all of the credit to our lab members, because the way that this came about is, as we started talking about putting this together, we said, well, let's just bring our two labs together on a big group Zoom call. It was fall 2020 when that sort of thing was still really a lot of fun to do. And we put them in breakout groups. And we just said, if you could have a list of things, you could like make faculty do something in their mentoring to be good mentors in their lab, what would you make us do? Write your dream list. And they came up with a whole great list of different action items that faculty can take. And then we broke these down into 7 general categories. And then for each of those categories, we created a primary commitment of like one thing that you can do, create a professional development, a way to convey professional development resources to your group, right? But then also a whole bunch of different best practices that you can implement. And again, nothing here is groundbreaking. This is all things that are pretty standard, like having individualized development plans or showing compassion and empathy. Shouldn't say they're pretty standard because they're not as common as they should be in academia, but none of it is too surprising, maybe is a good way to say it. But it all, again, takes intentionality, it takes systems, and it takes practices. But our goal here, again, is to be able to provide every person with just some really practical, actionable things that you can do at any time in order to improve your mentoring. And our work doesn't stop there, right? We need to be great mentors to others. But if we want to break the cycle that we've kind of found ourselves in, we also need to be helping others develop into great mentors as well. Because if you're working at all with any students or postdocs or early career researchers or folks in industry on your team, they are very likely going to be in mentoring and leadership roles, if not now, then in the future, right? And so rather than perpetuating this whole I wasn't trained for this challenge, we can not only be great mentors, but we can mentor them now so that they can develop these skills now that they will use in their careers later. And so how do you do this? Again, just lots of really actionable things you can do. You know, if you are a group leader, think about incorporating lessons on mentoring or leadership in your group meeting, or share resources you come across. No matter where you are in your career, you can do this. If you listen to a podcast that has some good advice on leadership or mentoring, share that on your Slack channel. No matter, well, the further along you are in your career, the more important this one is to share about your own mistakes or struggles, and then provide opportunities for those who you mentor to kind of take their mentoring skills for a test drive. Whoever you're mentoring, help them to have opportunities to mentor others as well. All right, and with that, then I will wrap up. Here's again that QR code for Mentor First, but just reminding you of what we've talked about, that we can have good mentoring and healthy lab culture as well as really amazing science, and those things actually go hand in hand, but this doesn't happen by default. You know, if we set out to do great science, great mentoring doesn't accidentally happen, but if we set out to have great mentoring and healthy environments, then great research can be the natural outcome of that. But that takes a lot of intentionality. And even if you weren't trained for how to do this, you can learn. You've learned how to be an expert in your field of research. And similarly, you can learn how to be an expert in mentoring. And you can put that learning into effect by having policies and systems that achieve the outcomes you want, and share ideas and resources with each other, because this is something where when we all get better at this, everyone wins. And then finally, never cross the finish line. Everything I've told you about that we've done in our lab, none of that are things that we were doing on day one of our research group. These are all things that we started doing mostly over the past 5 to 7 years. And all the time we're experimenting with, let's try this new practice and see how it works. And if it works great, we'll keep it or we'll evolve it. And if it doesn't work well, then we'll change it or we'll get rid of it. So keep updating and modifying and thinking about new ways to be a better mentor to those around us. And with that, I need to then thank all of these absolutely amazing people. I didn't talk today about the science that they do, but they are the reason that I am able to be in this job and to love my job as much as I do. They just create this amazing environment in our lab that is creative and innovative, and where people work hard and have a lot of fun. And most importantly, we show up and support each other and create an environment of inclusion and respect and kindness. And so I am so grateful to all of them. And thank you again so much for the opportunity to join you today. And thank you to everyone who attended.
So I just wanted to mention that if you guys enjoyed today's webinar, we do have an early career researcher hub on our website. And here you can see past ECR events that we've had. We also have other career development resources. So for example, if you're looking for help with resume writing or interviewing tips and tricks, we also talk about, upcoming travel grants and mentorship awards, as well as having interviews with other early career researchers as well. And then as an attendee of today's webinar, you are eligible to receive a free sample of a Proteintech antibody. We will send a follow-up email that will have a link where you can request your free sample. We'll also provide a certificate of attendance as well as a recording of this webinar. Jen, I forgot to mention there were a couple of comments on the chat that people were asking whether you'd be okay sharing your slides.
Yes, I'm totally good with that. I can send you a PDF of that later today to send out.
Awesome, thank you. So in the follow-up email, we'll also include a PDF of the slides as well then. Please do allow at least 1 week for the email to be sent out. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending and also engaging in, all the activities, the great Q&A. If you do have any other questions after the webinar is over, please feel free to email us at events@ptglab.com. I also want to thank Dr. Jen Heemstra one more time. Thank you so, so much for that wonderful, wonderful talk. I know it was very helpful for me. I'm sure it was very helpful for our audience as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all your insight with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And if you are interested in knowing about any of our upcoming events, please do follow us on our social media because we do post about all our upcoming events on there. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar.